I'm granting permission to Westwood Media Center to record the meeting, and would anybody else want to record the meeting? Seeing no one, we'll rise except for Angela for the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is moved over here now.
Oh, he's coming.
Oh, he's flagging.
Again.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We're sort of waiting for the select board to come in because they are our first agenda item. So we are having remote participation with Howard Messing, and as a result, Jane needs to call the member roll of everybody here.
Howard, can you hear me? Howard? Okay, good.
Go ahead, Colin.
Barb,
Here?
Peter Lenz,
Here?
Bill,
Here.
Cindy,
Here.
Lauren,
Here.
George,
Here.
Angela,
Here.
Peter Eddick,
Here.
Caitlin,
Here.
Toddy,
Here.
Diane is not here yet. Howard,
I'm here.
Chris,
Present.
and Mike.
Here.
Good.
And you call Jim for,
He's not here.
I know. Okay, all right. So tonight is the first night of our hearing on the warrant articles before the 2020 town meeting. Tonight's agenda will cover the non-financial articles being sponsored by the Select Board and the Planning Board. We'll hear a presentation on each article, and members are encouraged to ask any questions as each article is raised. I just ask that you indicate if you want to speak and wait until recognized, because I also have somebody that I can't see on the phone here, so I need to kind of make sure that it's in orderly fashion. We do have a second night of hearings on March 23rd, Monday, when we'll review the financial articles being sponsored by the Select Board. Discussions on any of the articles presented tonight may be continued to be discussed at that meeting. Just a note, we won't be taking any votes tonight. We'll reserve all our voting on all our recommendations after the public hearing on March 23rd. Public participation will take place when we conclude member questions of the planning, on the planning board. So that's down at the bottom. So we'll go through all of the questions that we have, and then we'll have public comments. Do we have Pam Dukeman and Assistant Town Manager, and Nancy Hyde, Chair of the Select Board, and Chris Coleman, Town Manager. We had one of them, we don't anymore.
She went to get them.
I know. See, that's why I didn't want to wait until I knew they were going to be here. No, they're talking. Anyway, so they'll do their presentations, and there've been some changes. You'll see the key document to look at is the, that's the planning board. You'll see there have been many changes to the documents already. So, yes. Hello, Select Board. Select Board. Yes, we have begun, and
Hello, everybody.
I've introduced you in your absence. Chris?
We just had a meeting beforehand.
Yeah.
So that's
And
okay.
Pam, does Pam want to come up too?
I think Laura's probably going to be. Okay, so here we are after 2 months of discussion of articles, and I just want to lead by saying that one, I appreciate the conversations that we've been having with you folks. The list was longer when we started this process. It's gotten shorter, and it's going to get even shorter tonight. In part, that's the good news, because some decisions have been made based on a lot of the conversations we're having and other things that have come up along the way. So we'll get right down to business and give you that update and talk where we do still have articles. And I will say in advance, as you know, I recused myself from discussions of Articles 4 and 5, and otherwise give you the update, and I'll ask Nora to speak to the medical use article. And if Steve Hart is here, is Steve here? Yes. Hi, Steve. Steve will represent the Westwood Environmental Action Committee and talk about the non-binding resolution. So to the first article that we have on the list, which is the discussion of changing the alarm systems on buildings throughout town. We, at our meeting just prior to this one, have voted to remove this article. And what the chief would like to do is have the opportunity to speak to all the impacted parties, should this article be put in place, and discuss with them in advance what we're doing, why we're doing it, get feedback, and with the expectation that this will come forward next year, either in the fall if we have a fall town meeting, or in the spring when we have the annual town meeting. And he will meet with those parties after the summertime and discuss it. And it impacts all of us. As you saw, and we discussed before, there are several municipal buildings on the list, so it has budget implications to us as well as to other entities in town, including some houses of worship. So we want to give them a chance to have a dialogue with us, which we weren't able to accomplish this year. So that one has been officially removed from your consideration. And Steve, could you join me up here? The next article is related, as I said, to the non-binding resolution regarding net zero energy buildings. And Steve Hart is the chair of the Westwood Environmental Action Committee, and he'll just share a few comments with you tonight on why that was brought forward and why we're looking for your support of this. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, thank you. Well, as we can see there, a net zero energy building is one that produces at least as much energy as it consumes. It can be done, the building itself, or it can be done by producing energy on site. And this can be achieved through, we feel like, thoughtful planning, energy efficiency measures, and clean energy production on site. Some considerations are a well-insulated building, highly efficient systems, as well as systems like geothermal pumps for heating and cooling. And energy production can come in the form of solar panels, again, on the building itself or on site. Benefits of net zero energy buildings are they're more comfortable for the people who use them. They have better air quality. They don't add to greenhouse gas emissions when they're in an all-electric building, which is certainly possible. And they have lower operating costs than similar buildings. So we actually, with this article, we see this as a continuation of a lot of work that's been done in town, specifically by the energy manager, Tom Philbin, which sort of begs the question then, why do we need to go to this step? So we feel that this article, if it was voted on favorably, would formalize the choices of the town and would make them clear to future leaders. The very existence of the article promotes collaboration and cooperation. And without having an article in place, we feel like it would just be a conversation we're having in 2020, which could then in the future be forgotten or swept aside. So we feel like it's important to formalize the wishes of the town leaders and townspeople now so that they're made clear in the future. And another question that's come up with through conversation is, why do we decide to make this a non-binding article? So I want to talk about that briefly. And our thought process was that we wanted to move away from a mandate and instead shift to a conversation. So we feel like this encourages exactly what we want when new buildings are being considered. Collaboration and communication between all interested parties. And in fact, this is actually what we're seeing right now with the school building project. The school building committee in January held a sustainability workshop that WEAC was part of, and they also recently formed a sustainability subcommittee. So fostering that type of communication was really our intent in writing the article. But we also feel like being non-binding can give some flexibility to planners. Really the last thing we'd want to do is force planners into a difficult situation where they would have to achieve the impossible on a site. So we recognize that environmental responsibility really needs to be paired with fiscal responsibility. And we feel pretty strongly that both of those goals can be achieved through active collaboration. And this can result in savings to the townspeople. So I just want to close actually with something probably you're all aware of. The operating costs of the high school, which is still a fairly new building in town. In 2018, the townspeople spent almost $500,000 for electricity and gas for the high school. The high school actually accounts for a little more than a third of all the electricity and gas use amongst town buildings. So we feel like a thoughtfully designed net zero energy building can mitigate those operating costs year over year and create savings and create sustainability both now and in the future. So appreciate your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions now or later.
Anybody questions? Jeff, Chris?
What's the difference between net zero energy consumption and net zero greenhouse gas emissions? In theory, I'm thinking you could have some use of fossil fuels by the building being offset by, like, say, solar panels, and it wouldn't meet the intent of this.
Well, a net zero energy building, it would not have to be fossil fuel free in order to achieve net zero energy status. A lot of buildings, specifically schools that are being designed now, some of them are trying to be fossil fuel free as well. Not all are. So it certainly could meet the intent of this article without being fossil fuel free.
That's my point, but it would not meet the intent of the article because you wouldn't have net zero greenhouse gas emissions. If you used any fossil fuel, you wouldn't have net zero greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah, I'm just looking back to see. I don't think that when we wrote the article, we're intending that all buildings would have to be greenhouse gas emission free.
That's
So
what you said. At least that's how I interpret it.
Yeah,
Peter?
I see. Okay.
Peter?
That wasn't the intent.
And I'm fully supportive of the conversation you just described with the school department and the select board if they have to build a new building. I just don't see the need for this non-binding resolution at all, because you have those conversations.
Yeah, I respect your position. We do feel, however, that it's important to have this voted on and be formalized so that it's not just a conversation now around a new school building, but it be conversation around future building projects in town.
But it's not formalized if it's a non-binding resolution.
But it's recorded that the vote was taken.
Yes. Peter?
I have a related question. My understanding of net zero greenhouse gas doesn't necessarily mean no greenhouse gas. It just means that you may purchase credits from someone for offsetting your greenhouse gas emissions. Firstly, is that correct? And secondly, I'm curious about who sells those credits.
Ideally, that is one way to achieve net zero energy. However, in this case, what we're looking at is that the energy would be produced on site. So it's either produced on the building itself, let's say solar panels in the building, or it could be produced by solar panels that are ground-mounted panels on site. But the energy would be, rather than purchasing renewable energy credits, it would be produced on site.
Anybody else? Nope, I think we're good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. The next article we have discussed previously regarding the overnight parking restrictions, and I'd like to refer you to this chart, which gives you a comparison of the current scenario, which is in place every day from December 1st through March 31st, to the proposed change in the restrictions, which would cover the period from November 15th through April 1st, but only on those days when inclement weather conditions will require snow and/or ice removal. So it's a longer period of time that it could be enacted, but only enacted under inclement weather conditions. That's the difference from the current situation. And we have talked with you previously about wanting this to help the Department of Public Works and the subcontractor companies that help us pre-treat roads and treat roads during and after storms so that we can have access to them as quickly as possible. It's important to have vehicles off the streets, and the current situation presents problems regularly. So this originated with the DPW. It was further reviewed with Chris Coleman, Town Administrator, and Chief Silva from the Police Department, and those departments, both departments agree that this is what they would like to have going forward.
I'll ask the first question about weather conditions. How will people be notified that it's the appropriate weather conditions, that these are out now in effect?
I'll answer that. So, the town would be notifying residents through our Code Red system, which is our emergency notification, our reverse 911 system. And if I could, Madam Chair, if I could just make a plug to encourage residents to enroll in the Code Red system. We can use your email address, we can use your cell number, so we can provide you with text messages, emails, as well as a phone call. And we would prefer to use emails and text messaging for certain messages, and for those extreme emergencies, something like this, it would be all three.
That's different than the robocall that we had tonight on voting, that.
Well, that was a call, that is our Code
Is
Red
that on
system.
code, that's not on Code Red?
That
is
is
it?
on Code Red,
Oh,
yes.
it is, so not unless you've signed up for it, you won't get it.
Correct. So we had a lot of landlines that were automatically added. Those numbers were automatically added to the system. A number of residents, not just in Westwood, and throughout the country actually, are dropping those landlines. So we want to encourage and remind residents to enroll both their cell numbers as well as their email addresses.
So you'll make it easy through the website or whatever, I
It's
assume.
on the
And we
front
would
main
use
page of the
social
website.
media as well.
Okay. Any other, Cindy?
With the reverse 911 system, how does that, do we pay a subscription for that? Does the town enroll in that? Is each broadcast cost something? Like, how does the program work exactly?
So we do pay a fee, particularly for the phone calls, but for as far as the text messages and cell messages, it's a much lower fee.
So every time you have to send out a message, there's a fee?
For the phone calls, yes.
And for the text messages also?
Yes.
Right, okay.
We've had this in place for over 10 years now, I
Right.
think. I'm just trying to remember when it goes back to, but yeah.
No, and the only reason why I ask is because I think we should just say no on-street parking from November 15th to April 1st and leave the pending inclement weather conditions out. I don't see any reason why we need to burden ourselves in the middle of trying to deal with snow removal, getting schools notified, right now we can't park on the street, so why add the pending inclement weather conditions to
I think
the-
this is what was worked out between the interested parties and the departments, and if it doesn't work well, we can always revisit it. It's a town meeting action, it's not overly burdensome to go through this process, so I think we want to see how it goes.
Will there be a fee associated with not removing your car during
Oh,
inclement
as there is
weather?
now,
Yes, yes.
yeah.
Barbara, just one comment. Chris, on the reverse 911, when it came through on caller ID tonight, it comes through with from an out-of-service area call, which we almost didn't answer it, so I don't know what's going on with the reverse 911.
Oh, mine
In the
didn't.
past, Town of Westwood would pop up.
Yeah,
That's
mine
not what we
did
got
too.
in our caller ID tonight.
Mine
So
said Town of
we can certainly
Westwood.
look into that, because mine came up as Town of Westwood.
No, it came out of service area.
Okay.
Okay,
We
so
can
we
we can certainly look into that.
Thank you,
Picking the phone up.
yeah. But it does leave a message.
If you pick it up, it'll leave a message. I didn't let it go to voice. I mean, we were looking at it, figuring it might be a spam call, and I said, I'll pick it up anyways.
You're getting a few of those these days? Gee,
Okay, Chris?
I guess.
I may have overstepped my role here, but I took a look at Chapter 380 in the current bylaw. And it has three sections. 380-11, which is the subject of the pending change. It's got 380-11.1, obstructing traffic. That has nothing to do with what we're talking about today. And then 380-11.2, which is specific to snow and ice emergencies, and it's not time limited or date limited. It just basically, whenever there's a snow or ice emergency, the town notifies residents and you can't park in the street. So the question I have is, with this change, you've basically duplicated 11.2 by making this change to .11 or -11.
Yes.
And then that raises the legal question about whether or not that change to -11 obliterates 11.2. So do we really need to do this? That's basically my question. Do we really need to do this?
So I believe we do, and if I can just clarify, I believe what you're referring to in 11.2. 11.2 subsection A reads, in order to facilitate a safe and orderly snow clearing operations, the emergency management director, who is the town administrator, may declare a snow or ice emergency based on existing or expected weather conditions. So if an emergency is not declared, that's the only way that where 11.2 would come into place.
Right.
So this would be,
But he can declare that at noontime,
yes,
okay?
yes.
And that's why
So
we would have that
that, we
one.
still have that protection in 11.2 that we don't have, that we're trying to provide something as far as an expansion in 11. So they are two
I guess-
separate sections.
And I guess the question is, does the change to -11, which is the first section of that chapter,
Yeah.
then mean that 11.2 is also limited to November 15th to April 1st?
No. Two separate sections. Town council also worked on this, with the,
And town council agrees that the changed 11 can coexist with the existing 11.2.
I can certainly ask him specifically, because he's here.
Yeah, so this changes the last one, which was just 2 to 5, between December 1st and March 31st. It coexisted for years with that section you're referencing. The section 2 is for a situation, and I like to think of it in terms of blizzard of 78. It started snowing much earlier than anybody anticipated. That's when the emergency management team's gonna have to get the cars off the streets.
Sorry, next time we need to get you a microphone.
Yeah.
Oh,
and-
he doesn't? Yeah, okay.
So what, if I can repeat, so everyone can hear, what town council said was that the existing
Thanks,
-11
Mike.
coexisted nicely with the existing -11.2, and I agree with him on that, because the existing -11 is not limited to any emergency. It's just between those dates and times, you can't park in the street. And the change expands that by 15 days into November, and by 4 hours, 2 hours earlier in the evening and 2 hours later, you know, in the early morning hours. But by limiting 11 to just those times when you have snow and ice emergency, you're duplicating what 11.2 already provides. And that's my concern, is that I think I agree with what was said before, that all we need to do is change the times in -11 and leave it. That's all.
Okay, anything else? Okay, move on.
Nora.
Oh, okay. Make sure you identify yourself if I haven't.
Nora Loughnane, I'm Director of Community and Economic Development, and I'll speak to you about the next two articles. First, you have Select Board Article 4, which is an article to accept municipal ownership of a portion of the former Westwood Lodge property encompassing the soccer and lacrosse field. It's shown on the plan as Lot 8. It's about 2.8 acres, and it's currently used by the town as a soccer and lacrosse field. The town would receive ownership of the property and continue to use it in the same manner.
So I was wondering, is there any change in responsibilities for the town as a result of this?
We already insure the use of it, so I don't think there really is. I think we already maintain it. That would be a continuing situation. So it would simply be that we would own it indefinitely, and we would not have to renegotiate a lease. And that's right, and also we receive 40 dedicated parking spaces on the lot that we will now own.
Anything else on this one? Chris?
I hate to be somebody who always speaks up, but I asked before what the cost to the town of doing this is, and I never got an answer.
So, right now, we go from the existing situation where the field was part of a nonprofit facility where it was not taxed. There's an interim situation where the entire 20 acres is taxed as a developable but uncompleted property. That will continue to be taxed as the properties, as the individual 40 units of the green development come online, they will all be taxed individually. This field has never been taxed before. If it stayed as part of the green property and the town did not accept ownership, it continued to be owned by the green company, it would be an excluded area because it would be owned by the green company but used by the town for nonprofit use. So I don't see that there's any tax implication there. I don't believe that that would be a portion of the property that would incur a tax liability for the developer. It has not been assessed under this current situation where there will be part of the property developed for for-profit uses and part of it continue to be restricted for nonprofit or, in this case, town-owned uses. But I don't see under any circumstances that there would be a difference in value.
Thank you for that explanation. I didn't realize that if a property was owned by a private person but used by the town, that it was eligible for a property tax exemption.
It's not that it would be a property tax exemption, it's that the value added to the property would be considered in the assessment. And the value there would be no value added to the property if it was just under a long-term lease to the town for recreational uses. It would not be a high-value property.
We're not paying any money to lease the field right now, are we?
I don't believe we are. I actually am not sure of that, but I don't believe we'll pay for it.
Anything else? Peter?
I perhaps have two questions. One is, would the town be responsible for some level of maintenance to make sure this continues as a soccer field? I'm also curious about your map. If you know what goes into Lot 2, I'd be interested in what that is.
Sure. So as far as maintenance, we maintain it now, and we would maintain it in the future. So although we don't own it now, we use it as a soccer field, and our Public Works Department has maintained it so it could be in continued use as a soccer field, and they've been doing that for many years now. So that would not change. The cost of maintenance should be equivalent. We will be receiving a parking area, which eventually, somewhere down the line, will need to be maintained. Probably not for another 20 years or so, but eventually the town will have the cost of maintaining that parking field. As far as Lot 2, that's a single-family residential lot that will be sold by the Green Company to an individual to build a single-family home.
Thank you.
Okay, next.
Next is Select Board Article 5. This is an article to accept municipal ownership of a portion of the former Westwood Lodge property shown on this map as Lot 1. The purpose of this is to have the town accept ownership of the parcel, which is a single-family lot, and then lease it to LifeWorks for the construction and operation of a 5-unit group home. The units in the group home will be eligible for listing on the subsidized housing inventory to count as affordable units for the town.
Yes, Chris?
Again, I don't know what the cost to the town of accepting this is. Just because LifeWorks operates as a nonprofit doesn't mean that they can't afford to pay their fair share of helping to operate the town. So we're losing something here.
So here is a case where either the Green Company will sell the lot to LifeWorks, and LifeWorks will be an exempt property as a nonprofit.
Well, you don't say that automatically. Nonprofit doesn't automatically get you a tax exemption.
LifeWorks has other properties in town that they use in a similar fashion, and they are exempt properties.
All right, but that's not automatic. I mean, we could tax LifeWorks. Just because they operate as a nonprofit doesn't mean that they automatically get a tax exemption.
I believe they are eligible for a tax exemption on this property if they own it, as they are on their other properties in town that they own and receive tax exemptions.
Maybe that's something we should investigate as to whether or not they're deserving of a tax exemption.
I think that on this one, we also get the benefit of more units within our affordable housing area, and I think, we have given them, just like we give houses of worship, they are tax exempt, they don't pay property taxes, et cetera.
Again, just because they are a house of worship doesn't automatically give them a tax exemption, but it's up to the town policymakers to decide whether or not
Well, I
somebody is
think that-
eligible and then grant it.
I think that, as Nora said, they've been granted it in many cases. Pam? Sorry. Yeah, you need to come up for the, she can come to the table here. Sorry, thank you.
Pam Dukeman, Finance Director for the town. I just want to clarify, it's not town policy on whether properties are taxed or not. That is state law in Massachusetts. The state determines what properties are tax exempt or not.
You're
So,
exactly right, but the state law, which I looked at, doesn't grant tax exemption automatically to somebody operating as a nonprofit.
if they meet the qualifications of the state, it's not a determination by the town. So we sent out the list of all of the tax exempt property in town out to the FinCom members. So houses of worship, educational programs. It's the state who determines whether that's taxable or not.
The state determines the eligibility. It's the town that actually determines whether or not that property gets the exemption.
No.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. So as we told you previously, I think, was it a week ago we were together? They all blend together. We have withdrawn Articles 6 and 7, so we won't be discussing those tonight. I'm going to ask Nora to come back, yes. We were able to preview with you Article 8. This is the article that started with the planning board, was voted to be withdrawn by the planning board. The select board voted to take it over, and Nora will just walk through it a little more quickly than the detailed presentation before and give you an update on the discussion that was held with the planning board last week.
Yes, so when we were here, I believe it was on the 11th, we walked you through the process over the past several years on how we've looked at medical uses in town. So this will now focus just on the article that's before you tonight. Prior to 2013, the town had one medical use in its bylaw, and that was office of a doctor or dentist not a resident on the premises. In 2013, when the University Avenue mixed-use district was adopted, there were two new definitions that were added within that section of the bylaw and defined in Section 2, our definition section. So now we had three definitions or three terms within the bylaw for medical uses. The office of a doctor or a dentist not a resident on the premises, which is shown in the use chart but not defined, and then the two new ones that were added as part of University Station, office of a healthcare professional and medical center or clinic. These two latter uses were defined in Section 2, the definition section of the bylaw, and specifically discussed in the University Avenue mixed-use district, but they were never added to the use chart. We need to clarify where these defined medical uses are permitted and where they're prohibited. That's the reason for the bylaw change that's before you tonight. The select board voted to take over ownership or sponsorship of this article when the planning board decided that they were not interested in pursuing this about a month ago. The select board focused their attention on just the very narrow aspects of the proposal that's before you, which involve placing these terms properly into the use chart. The select board revised the article to keep the existing definitions with no changes. Those are two definitions, one for office of a healthcare professional and one for medical center or clinic. The select board decided to add these terms to the use chart and to remove all references to the outdated term office of a doctor or dentist not a resident on the premises. In doing this, the select board came to the conclusion that other changes that were discussed over the past few years should be considered to the bylaw at a future town meeting, and they've encouraged the planning board to pursue further amendments for the next town meeting. So just to recap, there are two definitions that are already in the bylaw. The select board's article does not change them at all. The first definition is for office of a healthcare professional, which is an office for a medical doctor, dentist, psychologist, chiropractor, acupuncturist, or similar physical or mental health care professional, including clinical and laboratory analysis activities directly associated with such medical office use, but excluding offices within medical centers or clinics. And then the other definition is for medical center or clinics, which is currently defined as a building designed and used for the diagnosis and treatment of human patients that does not include substance rehabilitation or overnight care facilities. These are the existing definitions. There are no proposed changes to the definitions and no additional terms or definitions to be added by this proposed bylaw. This slide shows you what the use chart changes are. This use chart change is the essence of the change that would come about from the Select Board's article. It takes section 4.1.5.22 and changes the term office of a doctor or dentist not a resident on the premises to office of a healthcare professional. It allows that use in the same districts that the office of a doctor or dentist was allowed. That's all commercial districts by right and by special permit issued by the Zoning Board of Appeals where warranted in the general residence district. Then the Select Board's article adds section 4.1.5.23, and that adds the term medical center or clinic. It makes that term a prohibited use in all districts, except it allows a medical center or clinic by planning board approval only within the University Avenue mixed-use district. It does that by adding a note 8 to the table of principal uses. It amends section 4.2, the notes for the table of principal uses, by adding that section 8, that note 8, except in accordance with all applicable provisions of section 9.7, University Avenue mixed-use district. That allows the planning board to continue what it's doing now, which is to allow medical centers or clinics in University Avenue, but it prohibits them anywhere outside of University Avenue. Then it amends section 9.5.8.19, which is a section within the flexible multiple use overlay district portion of the bylaw. It takes the term office of a doctor or dentist not a resident on the premises, removes that and replaces it with office of a healthcare professional. I'm looking at the slide here, and the office of a doctor or dentist should be redlined as crossed out. Office of a healthcare professional should be shown. Apologize for that. And then the same thing in section 6.1.2, table of parking requirements. It should remove office of a doctor or dentist and replace it with office of a healthcare professional. So again, the office of a doctor or dentist should be redlined out, and office of a healthcare professional should be added.
Can I ask, the District I, so that does not just include University Station, it expands it, so by
Correct.
using the
That's why we say it's
the,
prohibited, and then we.
superscript 8, you are then showing how that's broken down.
Right. The industrial district runs all the way from the Dedham line to the Norwood line along University Avenue, but the portion of the industrial district that is permitted to have a medical center or clinic is only the portion that's within University Station.
So I'm sorry, Nora, is that the train station to Canton Street? Is that?
No, it's less than that. So
Less than
on
that.
on the east side of University Avenue, it would go from south of the train station to the former Bonefish Grill. So
Okay.
just before the,
It's about halfway.
yeah, about halfway. And on the left side of the street, it would go from the Dedham Town line, so from Blue Hill Drive, or the ramp now that was formerly Blue Hill Drive, it would go down to Harvard, and then take in Lifetime Fitness as well on the other side of the street. But it would not go all the way down to Canton Street.
Thank you.
Okay, any questions? And you've said, oh, yes, Kate.
So looking at these two definitions, is it possible that you could interpret the office of healthcare professional to include a rehab facility if it's being excluded from the medical center or clinic?
I don't believe you could. I believe a rehab facility or a substance rehabilitation and treatment facility remains an undefined use in our bylaw. I don't believe that office of a healthcare professional, that's a current definition, includes rehabilitation. Substance rehabilitation specifically, I think that's an undefined term.
One of the things we need to address,
Okay,
or, the planning board will address in their future review.
okay.
So I think that's an undefined term now, and by making a change, by adding medical center or clinic to our use chart, does nothing to change the definitions that are already in there.
So to clarify, you're adding this to just take care of one of the holes, but there are other things that it's much more involved, but the planning board will have to look at that
That's
in the
right.
future.
That's right.
So I would like to add, we did present this, the same presentation we gave to you a couple of weeks ago, we did with the planning board last week. And they had a vote to support this of 2 in favor, nobody opposed, and 2 abstentions. So it means they are not co-sponsoring this article with us, and they will have a subsequent vote for what they want to bring to town meeting.
Correct.
But for now, there was 2 people supported it, and we're still strongly supportive of moving this forward from the select board.
No, yeah, okay.
Can we ask why they abstained?
We're not permitted to ask that. A member is entitled to abstain. If they choose to share that, they can.
Can you tell us who it was that abstained?
No,
Yeah.
you can, when they come up, you can ask if they want to talk about it. Anything further? You can watch the,
Oh, no, I know.
meeting.
That's why I
on-
figured we could say who it was, since it is a public record.
Anything else? So it's not really opening us up to anything more. It's closing one little loophole.
What it does,
And
it leaves us open to
Yes.
other things that we have yet to address, and that's the definition of the substance rehabilitation
Right.
In hospitals.
and hospitals.
And part of the reason is that a lot of times those are not-for-profit, and you're putting them in a location where we have an agreement that you can negotiate.
That's correct, because we have a development agreement that runs with the University Station development. It dates back to when it originally started in 2013. And the development agreement requires that any nonprofit that may locate in University Station has to go through the select board and enter into an agreed-upon pilot agreement, payment in lieu of taxes. So we've done that once. There's very little land left as part of University Station to even be developed going forward. And it's in place. So if anything else were to on the 2 remaining lots, they'd have to go through the select board, and it doesn't mean we'd agree to it.
Mike?
So obviously, those additional issues that aren't going to be resolved this town meeting, because they're not before us, correct?
Correct.
So how vulnerable is the town up to and including next town meeting to these issues?
As much as we have been for the past few years.
But it still requires action in the planning board and the select board to get approval?
So if assuming this article goes through and is passed, a medical center or clinic is clearly defined in a way that it can only be allowed at University Station. A substance rehabilitation facility and a hospital remain undefined, and the procedure is open-ended. If someone came in to propose a hospital or rehabilitation or treatment facility anywhere in town, they would go to our building commissioner, who would say that's a use not permitted by the bylaw, and they would appeal that decision to the zoning board of appeals. And then it would be up to the zoning board to determine whether the use is permitted or not permitted.
So that needs to be addressed going forward. It's just not now.
If the planning board chooses not to address this again in the following year, will the Board of Selectmen do that, or the Select Board do that in the following year?
That's speculation that they won't, and we mentioned last week that that's very important, that it be taken up sooner rather than later. So my hope is that they do.
Anything further? Okay.
Okay? And on to an article that we added, we previewed with you a couple of weeks ago. Select Board Article 9 is, you can see on this in red, that at the meeting last week, Planning Board voted to withdraw their zoning amendment article that related to Morrison Park and Field. So you now have one article to consider. The purpose of that article that the Select Board is bringing through is solely to designate a portion of the Morrison Park complex as Article 97, which protects it as recreational property. We will include just the Little League field, softball field, and basketball courts under this recreation protection if it's passed. And it doesn't make it impossible, but very difficult to take it out of that protection. The land that's not included would be Morrison Park Snack Shack, the DPW garage, which was the building that was used temporarily by the fire department when the new Islington station was built, and then subsequently used by the MBTA when the East Street Bridge was replaced, and now it's back as a DPW garage. The parking area along the road, and the cell tower portion of the property that has the monopole flagpole on site. So we would exclude those, so repairs could be done. There's talk of a replacement snack shack, and we just want to be able to be sure that we could do what the town wishes to do on those portions of the overall parcel going forward, so we would exclude that. These are the steps to remove a property down the road once it's in Article 97 protection or under Article 97 protection. It starts with the Recreation Commission, who would have to agree unanimously that we would take the recreation portion of the property out from under Article 97. It would need the vote of town meeting at 2/3 vote, and then 2/3 vote by the houses of the state legislature, both the House and the Senate. You'd have to comply with any funding source that might have been used to acquire the property, but that doesn't hold in this particular case. And there's compliance with environmental affairs issues that would need to be done. And as I mentioned at the planning board last week, and in looking at what is posted online for this, it indicates that generally if you go to take a property out from under the 97 protection, you would probably have to put a like amount of property back in 97 protection. So somewhere else, something might need to go in. It's not listed as their 5 reasons, but it appears that that's what is necessary to gain favor to take it out. So we have the warrant article language and the proposed land. Town council, do we have any update on the work that you've been doing to define the parcel?
I spoke to a principal at Beta via email today, and he's supposed to be getting me the actual language that I need to define the lot that we want Article 97 to protect. I'm just waiting on that to finish the article.
So you'll have that for your next.
As soon as I get it,
Your next
I'll get
hearing.
it to Jane and she can distribute it.
Right. So we're not changing the scope of what we're discussing, it's just to be very specific with defining the portion of the parcel.
Any questions? Mike?
I'm just still confused over this. Explain to me, if you could, please, the difference between where we are currently and where we will be should this be approved, Article 97. Now, obviously, Article 97 has tighter controls over the land. But currently, we have controls over the land as I understand it as well, correct?
Yes, they're different, they don't involve the state. Our controls are our controls, it's our own town meeting process to decide if we wanted to sell the property. It would be up to the town itself. We wouldn't have the step that involves
The state legislature.
approving it. This, to me, is very similar to what would happen if you had land in conservation. You have to go to the state to unwind it. It makes it very difficult. So if you want to protect Morrison further than the process that would now be required, which is a
Maybe you can
high
explain
hurdle.
the process that's required now.
So if we wanted to sell any property in town, it has to meet with town meeting approval and the 2/3 vote in favor. So you know what we've gone through to do anything that requires two-thirds support.
Difficult.
It's very difficult, it's
And
challenging.
it's, the community at the town meeting makes that determination.
Correct,
That's the purpose.
correct.
So we're taking ourselves out of that situation and now bringing it to the state to.
Not out of it, it's still essentially there at two-thirds of our town meeting, but we're layering on more requirements.
We just lose flexibility relative to that parcel with building in the 97. That's how I see it.
We don't
Potential
completely
flexibility.
control our own destiny.
We
And
do
again,
not.
and flexibility that hasn't been used in,
60 years.
thank you.
Hey, Chris?
That would apply to leasing the land as well, right? We need
That's-
two-thirds
Well,
of town.
Leasing can go through the board, the select board.
Thank you.
Mr. Pereira?
You're welcome.
I believe it would depend on the length of the lease. If it's like a 99-year lease, that's considered taking a fee in the land.
Right.
But if it's a short-term lease, 20 years, 25 years, select board could probably negotiate that on their own.
Okay. Thank you.
I guess I think I share Mike's concern that we seem to be tying our hands as a town. I'm not sure why. And I say 50 years from now, the town wanted to relocate the Little League field and create more tennis, whatever the demands were in town. I just don't, I mean, it seems to me we are really, really tying ourselves up for a long, long time. And I'm not aware of anybody who wants to do anything but support the Little League field. So I'm not quite sure with the drive, what's the motivation for doing this besides putting ourselves in a position where we're giving up control to the state? I don't see the value in it.
We could, if we wanted to do it for other recreational purposes, like put in pickleball field, courts
We
or
could.
something. We have that flexibility, so.
As
if we
long as
wanted
it's for the pursuance of recreational use.
recreation. So, I mean, I think the concern was, and the initial underlying concern from planning board was if, from their original article, was that selectmen could lease the property. But if you were to lease the property to somebody, what would then the procedure have to go through? If, say, somebody wanted to come in and build a building there, you lease the property and they build a building, what sort of,
That'd be a public process.
okay,
The
but
select
not,
board.
not a town meeting process?
Correct.
Okay.
That-
But a planning.
Given what Pat just said, if we wanted to, if you enter into a 99-year lease, the way that is viewed is as if it's a sale.
Yeah.
If it's a transfer of fee ownership. Even though it has a finite period, it's still sufficient to be considered that. So it's hard to imagine somebody wanting to lease the property and build something under a 20-year lease, let's say, because at the end of the 20-year lease, that means they wouldn't be able to do their building anymore.
Right.
Unless it was renewed, extended, or whatever. And even if you have renewal options built in, doesn't that start to make it look like a sale?
You asked town council that
Yeah,
question.
I
but
mean,
yeah,
there's a
would think so.
point, there's a point where renew, options to extend the lease can make it start looking like a sale. So from a practical standpoint, it's hard to imagine leasing the land for a substantial building to be built on it. It's just hard to even conjure up what kind of scenario that might be. Maybe more creative people can do it. It's not anything that the town has considered to date for 50 or 60 years. It's not anything we've talked about ever. And I think what the message is that we're trying to say is, this is a valuable asset as a recreational option. Do you want to take this step to protect it further?
Just two more other quick thoughts. I agree with George and Mike, and I would say as daunting as getting 2/3 of the House and Senate of the state legislature to agree, I think the more daunting thing is to get the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs to agree. I've dealt with Massachusetts Executive Office of Environmental Affairs in other contexts, and that's where I think you came up with the notion that they wouldn't agree unless you had an equal amount of
Falls under
land
that.
to put back into 97, I don't know where we'd find that
Right.
within Westwood. So, and also I would say, be very careful about how you word this, because right now it says recreational playing fields. That may preclude use of the land for just pure recreation. But you see, words matter, so you have to be very
Yep.
careful on
No,
how
I
you
just was
word.
looking for town council.
I've spoken with DCR about this. They manage this side of these equations for the state. They've agreed to review my final language as soon as I get it, to hope to give you some non-concern in that area. But they've also told me that as long as it's used, and I think I said this the last time it was before you, I raised the specter, well, what if baseball's no longer played? Although it bothered me deeply to do that. They said as long as it's still used for recreational purposes, it's going to be fine.
That's great. I would just, if that's the case, just strike the word playing.
Howard has a question. Oh, Howard has a question?
Howard? Howard? Read his question.
Yes. Jane is going to read Howard Messing's question.
Howard would like to know, who are we protecting it from?
Ourselves.
The enemy. Good question.
Good question, Howard. I don't know who we're protecting it from. I think, it's trying to look into the future, and we can't sit here today and know what the future holds. People change, will come and go. People who live in town will come and go. It's, do we want to make a decision now that would impact future generations in town regarding this parcel? And you do need to weigh, where are we right now, and is there a concern that rises to doing this? And this, as you remember, arose out of a discussion from the planning board article. And what we said is, through getting advice from people who know about Article 97, if you really want to protect it from it being anything other than recreational use, this is the better way to go. Because just taking it out from the overlay zoning still left it with the underlying local business district zoning. And that didn't really accomplish what appeared to be the goal.
Yes.
So what we do know, that if this goes through and gets passed, we do know the future makes it that much more difficult for the town to do anything. So we
Correct.
established that.
Correct.
So, and that's the unintended consequence, because we can't predict the future, but we're taking a potential decision away from everyone in the community relative to what may or may not occur there.
And yes, but Article 97 exists for a reason. And there are many times that properties end up under Article 97 for that kind of protection, so that it can't become something else.
We're saying we're smarter than ourselves in the future.
Howard, I couldn't have said it better, that's what I was trying to get at.
Hello?
Yep. Well, yeah, you got a laugh out of us.
There was a mic drop on that one. Yeah,
We're glitching a little bit. He's lagging a little behind.
He's lagging, okay. I mean, I can understand, this is the only property, recreation property, I can see this happening, because in a sense, it's an urban area in that it's a well-developed all around it, and it's not like other playing fields that are associated with schools. And, we have to be somewhat flexible for the schools, and they service the schools. This is kind of a standalone property. I can understand the concern.
No one's debating the current use of it and
Yeah. Oh, I
maintaining it
know.
as it is and continuing it. But again, to Howard's point, we can't predict the future. However, we're establishing a part of our future by moving along with this and essentially making it impossible when that, who knows, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years from now, could hurt the town. That's all.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah, I think that we already have a hurdle that exists today, right? And this is raising that hurdle even higher. But by virtue of this, as Mike says, we are predicting the future, or we are trying to predict the future
Affecting the future.
by protecting it, well, from
Controlling it.
ourselves or from someone. So,
Well, we're not raising the hurdle by just a few inches. I think we're raising it by a quantum level.
right, and so therefore, we are trying to predict the future in that way. And again, if you look back, it's existed for 60 years. Might not be broken. That's all I got.
Okay. I think we're done the conversation? Okay.
Okay.
Moving right along.
So, that, what we just discussed became Select Board Article 9. Earlier tonight, we voted to use miscellaneous Article 2 for the potential acceptance of a road. We're not formally presenting anything to you tonight, but we may be at your next public hearing, so we have a question for you. If we do, we'll decide that at our March 16th meeting, a week in advance of your second public hearing. And the mailing that you had go out already didn't have that, so you need to determine how to publicly notice it. I mean, it can be on the meeting agenda for sure, added to that, but you've already done your mailing. So we wanted to give you the heads up that we may be bringing this forward on the 23rd. We will provide you with a lot of information regarding recent actions where we have done road acceptances. So this is taking a private road that the town is not responsible for maintaining and accepting it as a public road and therefore taking over all responsibility. This is often done when we have a development and the roads are private until such time as the developer meets certain levels of completion of the road work. And then it will come to us, the planning board will say, you know, they're still holding a bond payment, or everything's done and they've released that, and we go through the town meeting process. This is for those roads that are different than that, that have been, I think the most recent one is on Fisher Street. There's the very end of Fisher Street was not part of the whole public road of Fisher Street, and it's the point furthest down closest to the high school. And I don't know, I want to say 5-6 years ago, about that time, that was I believe the most recent one that we did, where we took that private portion of the road, and we accepted it. And generally, when we do that, we agree with the property owners to split the cost to pave the road. And they are given the opportunity to either pay for their share right up front or pay for it over 20 years. So if we come back with that, we will walk you through all that so you can be comfortable. I know it's coming late, but these tend to be very straightforward. The property owners have agreed to pay 50%. The DPW can budget the 50%, and we want to accept it, and the DPW will maintain it, and it's pretty straightforward. And the road in question that we're looking at is Cranston Avenue. It's on the other side of the East Street Rotary. So you can be like me and say, I didn't know we had a Cranston Avenue in Westwood. It's on the Dedham side of the East Street Rotary.
Okay,
So we'll let you know.
That'd be miscellaneous too? You pick up
Yes,
the placeholder
and we have nothing on
that?
3 and 4 yet, so on the 16th, we'll take action ourselves to address those.
We'll make sure that we get whatever posting needs to go out.
Are public questions waiting until the end?
Yes, at the very end, after the planning board. So,
I might not be here.
we'll see.
Okay. Again, thank you very much for
Okay, any more questions from the board
your
for the
consideration.
select board? Okay, so if you can hang out, but you've got at least one other select board member here. So, planning board, Brian or Deborah? Oh, yes. So, What? Don't know, maybe negotiation would be, well, no, well, okay. Welcome to Brian Gorman and Deborah Conant from the Planning Board. And you have, right now you've got 4 articles, I think.
I believe it's 3 at this point.
You have
yeah.
to let us know.
Yeah, so I'll
Yes.
walk you through it. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present. So the very first article is the planning board article related to accessory uses in residential districts related to short-term rentals. So as you can see in the accessory use chart here this is the current zoning bylaw, so section 4335. So it's the renting of a room by resident owner, the furnishings of a table or board, and a dwelling by the resident owner. So this is the existing zoning language. What we've discussed is adding in a definition for short-term rental as well as long-term rental. So the short-term rental definition would be renting of rooms by resident owner or the furnishings of table board in a dwelling by the resident owner to a single family or to not more than 3 persons other than members of the family for 5 consecutive days up to 29 consecutive days. The long-term rental would be renting of a room under that same language for 30 or more consecutive days. So here you have your accessory use table with the additions to it. So you have your long-term rental, your short-term rental, and the renting of rooms for fewer than 5 days. So in this place, you would have a restriction where you wouldn't be able to rent for fewer than 5 consecutive days. So that's the language under discussion. And so the summary of this is that we currently do not have definitions for short-term and long-term rentals. A lot of towns are trying to be proactive in doing this. There are some issues that other towns have dealt with. There's lots of research out there that you can do, many articles, and even in Springtown meetings in a number of different towns, they are looking into definitions for short-term rentals and ways of adding some different types of guidances for the use of them. Within the town of Westwood, there are some residents that have issues with a neighbor who has short-term rentals. And this is something that other residents in town may not even be aware of. They can go anywhere by right and rent by the night, 2 nights, 3 nights, what have you. The intention of the article is to continue to allow residents to rent rooms by right, but for a duration of greater than 5 days. What can happen now is that you can have somebody coming in, purchasing a unit, and then using it for essentially a business purpose, where you can have one owner occupied, and then you're renting the rooms from that. So that's what this article is trying to deal with. And so that's the end of the presentation.
I have a quick question. Why do you differentiate between short-term and long-term rental when it's really what you want to exclude is the very short-term rental? Because long-term and short-term have the same definition, just, anything over 5 days.
Yes. So I'll go back to.
I didn't see any difference in the chart.
So the short term is, so I'll go back to the definition. Short term is for over 5 consecutive days up to 29.
Yeah.
And then long term is 30 or more.
Yeah. And what's the difference between
And
the
then
two
the-
of them?
the-
They can all be located in the same location.
I think it's to make it distinguish 0 to 5.
I can understand that, but it's 0 to 5, but anything over 5, you're saying is allowed, and it's the same thing. Unless you're anticipating, further limitations or something. I'm not really sure why you have the,
Yeah, it's a good question I can bring back to the board.
okay. Anyway, anybody else? Peter?
Could you just define furnishing of table board? What that means?
Yeah, so and this question came up at our planning board meeting, so essentially, I believe it has to do with like it goes back to some of the bed and breakfast. Nora was able to describe this older language that has been in the state, if Nora's here, to describe that.
Table board is just like a bed and breakfast where you actually provide a meal or multiple meals to the people staying here.
Very old-fashioned term. Yes, Peter?
Would you describe to me what the status would be of someone who wants to rent a home for the weekend? Is that to be prohibited?
Right, so that would be 2 days. So this was one of the things that I see as a continued discussion within the board, is that 5 days may be a little bit too restrictive. So to your point, that would be restricted.
I'm asking what would be the status of, is it now legal to do that? And would it be legal to do that if this article were to be enacted?
Yeah, so it's currently, you can do that. So this article, as you see tonight, that would not be, because that's fewer than the 5 days.
A 2-day rental would be prohibited.
Right.
George?
But Brian, I know we've had a lot of discussion in this past, and I think as I've expressed to you, there are over 5,000 individual homes for the 10-year-old census, or probably more today. And I view this as quite a significant restriction on people's property rights. I tried to do a lot of research on Airbnb and get a sense of what's going on in our town. One thing I learned about Airbnb is they do background checks. They do background checks to the best of their ability on hosts. They do background check on guests. And it would seem to me that if somebody, and you look at some of the pictures online, and they look pretty nice rooms, nice accommodations. And if somebody wants to participate in Airbnb and strive to be a 4 or 5-star host, which I guess is the goal, and rent their home out and generally 2 nights, 3 nights, I really don't have a problem with that. In fact, I think you're restricting people's use. And then I'll give you a scenario. Somebody, from the Midwest needs to bring their child into a children's hospital for 2 or 3 days of treatment, and they decide they'd rather stay in the suburb instead of downtown Boston. We're basically saying you can't do that in our town. So I don't understand what the demand is. I know you've told us there are probably some folks who have problems with what their neighbors are doing, but I don't see that as the typical Airbnb issue and everything I've been able to find online. And I also view this, I just don't understand the rationale or basis for 5 days. I think it's very, very arbitrary. I think it's highly restrictive, and I would be extremely concerned if we felt knowledgeable enough to say that we're going to restrict over 5,000 property owners in this town from being able to participate with, frankly, the way the world is changing. Airbnb is here to stay. And I think the real issue is to monitor it and make sure that the background checks are done. You're getting good people in, and they seem to self-police themselves fairly well. So I think we've asked in the past for data, for information. I think you've indicated there are some residents who may speak, but I don't see an overwhelming crisis in this town that we have to do something like this. And I think it's unnecessarily restrictive.
Tom?
Regardless of whether a home is being rented out by rooms or whatnot, the limit on number of cars per household exists still, correct, right? And what is that? Is it 3 cars per house?
If you have parking or storage for more than 3 vehicles, you're required to have a special permit currently. So that 4th parking or storage space, question of whether there actually has to be a car in the space or not, that's something that we discussed in previous years and still needs to be addressed.
So if someone were renting out a couple of rooms in an Airbnb fashion, they would be, and if it was a single-family home,
A single-family home, and if there were 4 or more vehicles clearly stored on the property without a special permit, that would be a violation.
it would be a violation. So Brian, what's the, obviously some folks, there's some residents that have issue with it, with some neighbors. What is the crux of the concern?
Yeah, so I don't know if there's one neighbor came in and gave a nice summary. Essentially what the situation they're dealing with, it appears that that the house was purchased to rent out as an Airbnb.
But they are a resident. The people
I
are
mean,
residents.
I'm only talking about what I've heard.
Okay.
So I don't know the details, but it seems like it is a pure purchase to monetize and use as a business in a residential area. And I agree, it's probably on the rarer side of things, but when it happens, it's very impactful. And I probably wouldn't be supporting this if it wasn't for those extreme cases. And they can sort of go in anywhere. And yeah, so my heart goes out to those residents. So if the town can put forward some articles to support them, like in the future I see articles that might talk about your inspections, your registration, potential fees. Lots of towns are doing lots of different creative ways to deal with their issues. I wish the resident was here tonight so that you could hear specifics.
Right,
They
I guess
talk-
I'm looking for to define impactful. And is it more than 3 cars?
No, it's not even number of cars it has to do with. They were talking about debris, an unkept spot. Yeah, they went into details about that, some more physicality around the dwelling.
So I guess my issue is that those can happen no matter whether the person is there for one day or you've got them in for a month or they bought the house. You know, you can't control your neighbors. You know, I think you control them like through the appearance of the house, you know, whether you can go to the building.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Building department, you know, but to kind of take this big, we had the same thing with the article last year, take a big huge hammer and penalize everybody for one neighbor, and my heart goes out to them, but, you know, the comment was about traffic too. It's a public road, and if they had a doctor's office, if the people moved in and had a doctor's office there, they'd be having traffic. You know, they talk about, you know, well, they can't control who's in there. You can't control who's your next door neighbor anyway.
Yeah, no, I hear what
and
you're
I had that instance with somebody with traffic in my neighborhood, and, you know, you couldn't control it. The best you can do is deal with the police, or, you know, kind of everybody have a sit down and talk to him. I'd be more concerned if he wasn't, you know, the rule is if you're a resident of a house and you can rent it out. If he wasn't a resident, I'd be more concerned. But we have a rule that covers that. So I'm like, you know, have you talked to the police about this particular instance and what they viewed as how it could be addressed?
Yeah, but I mean, like, cigarette butts on the ground aren't something that I don't think that they call the police for that type of a thing.
Okay, but every landscaper does that in everybody's front yard, so.
I mean, hopefully she shows up at the next hearing so that you can hear it from her. It's,
But I'm just saying, go ahead, Mike.
Is it within the planning board's responsibility to establish rules and regulations, if you will, for an Airbnb type setup? Is that how that process would work? Because currently, as I understand it, there are no current regulations, correct?
there are no definitions for short and long-term, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you look at, what some towns do is they'll even look into, they'll limit the number of bedrooms. This one seems to go into more of like the number of like one family or 3 individuals. You have others, even Plymouth, they went into, they limited it so that you couldn't have a less than 20-hour stay. So different towns have different issues to deal with. But it is true today, somebody can purchase a home, have one person live there, and they're sort of the innkeeper, and you can have multiple rooms being used just for rooms, and it can be disruptive if you're an immediate neighbor of that.
And it could also be a revenue source for the town should we enact some language that requires an Airbnb to do certain things. So is that?
Yep, in the future, I would see a bylaw doing that, yeah.
But I think that some of those bylaws are select board bylaws as opposed to planning board, or they're
Yeah, so the
you know,
planning board would
finance,
work
yeah.
with selectmen or vice versa.
You'd work more on things like health department or inspections or something like that.
Yeah, whatever the case may be, but yeah.
Barb, quick
Yeah, Tom.
question, and this might be for Pat, sorry, Pat. Regarding the taxes, there's a tax now on rentals. Is that go to only the state, or does the town get a piece?
I believe, having a piece of rental property on Cape Cod, I believe it goes mostly to the state, but the town can also perhaps set up its own ability to get their hands on some of that money or revenue.
Kind of like what you did, the hotel tax?
Kind of. I believe that to be the case. I've not researched that thoroughly. I know that my situation on the Cape, the state dipped in and it's taking an additional 14% out of my pocket.
Right.
And a lot of people sold their rental properties or have started to sell their rental properties because of that down there. So right now it's statewide, but there are places where the town does get involved, and the town can get involved operationally in terms of making you self-certify certain safety things, which is what the town of Dennis does with my property down there. They make me self-certify around smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, and things like that, so.
Thanks. And last question for me, how many towns in the Commonwealth have a restriction?
So
Somewhat.
So a number of towns are starting to get into, so like Milton, they have a bylaw coming forward. I tried to do some research on that. As far as the number of days, Lennox goes as far as to cap the number of days too. So it's different town by town. But this I would say is on the more restrictive side. So I would think at the planning board's next meeting to look into this actual limit that might be too restrictive.
So we don't know how many towns in the state have something along those.
Well, I just mentioned 2, and that's as far as I went for the others. But a lot of towns they're behind in this type of thing. Like Brookline's looking into it also, and they, so it's a matter of trying to get ahead and be proactive, so to try to minimize any type of effect.
Thank you.
Chris?
How would the overlay districts play into this?
I believe it's town-wide, so it's up there, the districts are,
So, for example, in Islington, we had a flexible multi-use overlay district in which a number of rental properties have been constructed. Would you look to the underlying business A district and say it's not allowed then?
so this is,
Sure, Disney
so it looks like it appears to be no.
So, to extend that to Westwood Station, what you're saying is that nobody in Westwood Station can do an Airbnb for less than 5 days in any of the properties, even if they're leasing it, if it's allowed by the lease, or if they've bought the condo outright, they're prohibited from using that condo for less than 5-day rental.
Yeah, go please.
So this is renting of rooms only, it's not renting an entire unit.
No, that's what I
It's
mean,
just
renting of
Just the
rooms.
rooms. And right now, renting of rooms is permitted in residential districts. It's not permitted in commercial districts. So regardless of whether there's an overlay district, the underlying district would be the one that rules there.
Thanks.
Barbara,
Yes.
I think you appropriately summarized the issue, that people would clearly be concerned about a difficult issue that Brian May describing a resident as having, but my sense is that that's not, if you look online, that's not the average Airbnb, what's going on. So I think we've sort of got an issue where there may be a very legitimate concern, and nobody wants to see a house with cigarette butts on the street, et cetera. But I don't think this solves that.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's my point. So it's respect for, I feel our hearts go out to somebody who has to deal with an unsightly situation like that. But there may be 10 or 15 or 25 people who are doing Airbnbs in this town and actually providing a very nice service. And maybe they're making a little money for themselves, and people are happy. And I think the Airbnb is pretty good and self-regulated. I would guess that not many Airbnb clients are going to stay in that situation because the ratings are going to be terrible.
I just think you're kind of giving the neighbors false hope, because I think something needs to be addressed, but it's maybe,
I don't agree with that.
I don't see 5 days being much different than 2 days. So,
Yep.
anyway, any other comments?
Great, thank you.
So is that it?
So two more.
Oh, okay.
So the next article has to do with prohibitive uses. So it's adding in this sentence, any use not listed herein or otherwise permitted in a district shall be deemed as prohibited. See, the idea here is that there's a type of bylaw called a prohibitive bylaw. So we do have a sentence that comes in right before this that goes to that point. At our previous planning board meeting, we made a request to the building commissioner, and so the building commissioner responded. So the idea was, how will this new sentence change the way that we currently work? So at our next planning board meeting on March 17th, we will evaluate that statement from the building commissioner to decide if this has an impact on our decision to go forward with this.
Since the building commissioner is here, can I ask him to speak
Yes.
Yeah, don't be contacted
about,
about this issue.
okay, you haven't been contacted? Okay.
And Abby, who is the,
You contacted me or the planning board?
I didn't have
I mean, it does nothing to the client. It doesn't hurt it, it doesn't improve it.
Oh, sorry, could you take the, sorry, and could you identify yourself?
Building commissioner, hi, how you doing? I don't see that it improves it or it hurts it.
Okay.
We already have language that says you can't put uses that aren't described in the bylaw, and this is just being redundant.
Yeah.
It's not gonna hurt it, but I'm not sure you need it.
Okay.
yeah, so we will,
We haven't identified any unintended consequences yet? Like, of adding that?
I mean, I think it goes both ways, but I think, I value your statement, so we were, so we haven't had a chance to meet as a board with that, so we will take that into consideration, whether or not we'll move forward.
So you could let us, does anybody else have anything? Yeah, so you'll let us know?
Exactly.
At our next meeting? Okay.
And the last warrant article has to do with firearms. So this is the firearms, explosive sales and services. So here's your use table. So what the planning board has been discussing is to remove from the zoning of local business A and local business B. So that's Washington Street and High Street. And that's.
Any comments? Anything? Do we have a result from Dedham? Have they had their result from their?
I believe that they weren't able to. David, you want to speak to this? The Dedham.
Oh, okay. Pat.
I've been trying to watch that. I haven't seen a result. Dave, have you seen a result? I don't have any. So they should get a result almost any day sometime in March about their December town meeting bylaw. That should tell us what the direction the Attorney General's taking on this, if she's taking a new direction from previous Attorney Generals or not. So,
But theirs was kind of an, after the fact.
well,
Yeah, retroactive.
they've got a part of that they're gonna try and enforce it after the fact, which is a whole nother can of worms, as they say. But I think it's a worthwhile exercise to go forward on this and trying to make the Attorney General understand that we as towns want to regulate this on our own. So I think it's a worthwhile exercise in that. And depending on how they come out in Dedham, I'll try and give you as much as I can on whether or not I think that is still the case.
Well, I think we'll, when we take our vote, we'll take the vote of how we want to go forward, and there's no guarantee of anything, how the Attorney General will view it.
There's no
so-
guarantee of anything at any time. That's correct.
Okay, so,
And then, Mr. Chair, I'd like to just make a motion to continue the planning board hearing to Tuesday, March 17th at 7 PM at 50 Carter Street. Yeah, should
no,
we do
we're-
public comment?
we'll do public comments, but I don't know, should we do public comments before they kind of put theirs, because we want to do public comments. The other question is, did you want to ask your question, Cindy, of the planning board?
Oh, I did want to know, who abstained?
I did.
And there were 2 abstentions?
And Bill Delay.
I'm sorry?
Bill Delay.
Bill Delay. Thank you. But someone did want to know why, too.
Yeah.
Did you want to ask why? Why for the abstention?
So I think that, you need to understand for the record, we've tried to bring the whole rehab article forward since 2019.
Don't call it the rehab article,
The
please. It
substance
causes so
abuse
much confusion to people.
rehabilitation.
The medical use.
We wanted to bring articles forward for November, and they didn't want to have a town meeting. We wanted to bring some forward for this town meeting, and they didn't want any articles, but we wanted them to come forward anyways. In terms of the definitions, I think that we have a good basis to work with, but I don't think we're there yet. And in terms of the footnote, I think that I struggle with the footnote, and I think that if you look at the use chart, it's for underlying districts. The University Ave overlay district has its own uses, so why are we carrying it over to the underlying district use table? That's my concern right now.
Okay. Does anybody have any other questions for the planning board? Okay, so now we're going to open up to public participation. So when I recognize you, you come up to the microphone here, state your name and address, and direct your comments to the chair. And if there's a question that you want an answer to from somebody else in the room, I will direct it to the responder, and they can answer. Keep your comments respectful and to the article, and your opinions are important to FinCom, as we need to hear from residents regarding these articles. And just remember, this isn't a dialogue or discussion or debate. You're giving us information that we obviously need to formulate our opinions. So, anyway, I open it up. Yes.
Hi, my name is Patty Rockensies. I'm 69 Hawthorne Street. And I want to actually, I wonder if you could bring up the definitions for medical health professional again. I just wanted to point something out.
We kind of,
Yep.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, Nora's got it, I thought.
Is it on this one?
no.
It's on the select board.
Sorry.
No, no problem. It's page 14 for all, or 13. Might be 12. 12.
And this is really also to address Ms. Jerzik's point. I do not fancy myself a wordsmith at all, but my research actually for my master's thesis was in mathematical logic. And if you look at the wording, I'll kind of pull this together. If you look at the wording of it, for the healthcare professional wording, it's excluding offices within medical centers or clinics. So that's a negative. Then it refers to the medical center or clinic, which does not include substance rehabilitation. So what happens there logically is you basically have a double negative. So you're excluding offices that exclude rehabilitation, which would actually be a loophole logically, and it could include rehabilitation. So for those 6 Ys that were in the chart earlier, it actually logically leaves open a possibility for rehab to be under the auspices of an office healthcare professional. So I know that those definitions are not currently up for change, but to your point, there is actually an issue there. And so I would have a problem with those yeses unless that definition were more specific and also excluding substance rehabilitation office.
I think I'd like Nora, since she's involved in the article, she can talk to that too.
Sure. So as we discussed, these are the existing definitions, and those holes are there. There is no definition for substance rehabilitation and treatment facility. There is no definition for hospital or overnight care facilities. That's in the current bylaw. The proposal here does not add those. It does not change that. It doesn't alter these definitions. It simply puts these uses into the chart that are already defined so that those uses are clearly designated to specific districts. In the case of the medical center or clinic, it's clearly designated just to the medical center or clinic within University Station, and the Office of Healthcare Professional is allowed wherever office of a doctor or dentist is allowed. Right now, without those items in the chart and with the definitions that are there today in the bylaw, if someone wanted to come in with either of those uses, they would go to the building commissioner, and he would send them to the zoning board of appeals. It's no different.
To your point, the yeses those are in black. Those haven't changed. So the problem is that there's a hole, and it's not the select board's role to kind of do the article, but they feel that this was an easy fix to solve one issue. But there are definitely other issues that need to be fixed. And, I think your point's well taken.
But the chart is new.
No, the chart isn't
chart
new.
is not new.
There,
Okay.
what was added was the medical center or clinic, which was new, and it said no everywhere except for within the industrial district, which would then be the University Ave district.
So the ends are what's.
So the ends are what.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah,
think.
so if it's red, it's new, and the black is the same.
Gotcha, I understand. So I just think there's a number of us that see that loophole there, and I
And
think
it's
that
been
the
there, yeah.
sooner that gets closed up, and perhaps those definitions are sort of clarified very clearly, and again, I'm not the wordsmith to do that, but that actually leaves a lot of tension and anxiety in people who are in those yeses.
Talk to the planning board.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question, actually?
Yes, Caitlin.
So we're changing this top part, Office of Doctor or Dentist, we're gonna say Office of Healthcare Professional.
Yeah.
Is it better for us to leave it as is and just say doctor or dentist? Does that have any impact?
I don't believe it does, because I think if you leave it office of a doctor or dentist, you still have that question, where you have one term in the use chart and one term that's defined. I think eliminating the undefined term actually clears up some confusion.
Do you agree?
I do.
Legal?
Okay, next. Yep.
Hi, Sandra Castellini, 54 Burr Street. Just building on what Patty said, and what you said earlier, I feel like when we added this bottom line, right, that's red, that does kind of play to the loophole of the Ys that are left over, right? So let's pretend we don't even have this article up and we only have the black and white there. I think by adding this row, we're kind of saying, okay, no, we can't have a rehab facility here. So people are automatically then going to go, okay, well, where can we have something? Here's the Ys, and let's find a loophole here. So I feel like it magnifies the ability to have loopholes there, and that's why we don't want this amendment to happen.
You would prefer no change?
Correct.
And wait for a bigger.
Yeah, I think we need to tackle the issues. And I just want to mention that I know of several area towns that are specifically not defining it. Because when this was first going in 2017, and then we had the problem with the logistics and it got reversed. I had asked point blank at one of the recent planning board meetings, have we been approached by a rehab facility in those times? Because it seemed like kind of we were on fire, this was gonna happen imminent, but now we are into, 2020, and I was told that we were not approached. So I feel like we might be attaching urgency to something that, might be the benefit risk might be better untouched.
Anybody else? Yes, go ahead.
Good evening, Nada Milisavljevic Fabrizio. I'd like to speak to the medical use article. I have here from December of 2012, the planning board public hearing for the proposed University Avenue mixed-use district zoning bylaw. And it specifically says the University Ave district differs from traditional zoning. And that's when this was being brought before town meeting, whether or not we should approve the 2013 contract with the new developers instead of the defunct developers. And my question is, the medical use zoning, we had prior to 2013 just a single medical term, the office of the doctor or dentist, not on a resident premise. And then we were told that since 2013, 3 medical uses have been used, 3 medical use terms. And you have the office of doctor or dentist, you have the healthcare professional, and you have the medical center or the clinic. From this, I guess, PowerPoint from 2012 tells me that the 3 medical terms that we're using, Office of Healthcare Professional, the new terms, medical center or clinic, that language was crafted for, specific to, and incorporated in the Master Development Agreement for University Station. And I don't see why we even need this, because I believe that when you go to our zoning bylaws, the UAMUD district is the overlay district at University Station. And then you have underlying districts. If you want the zoning and you want to put an office of a healthcare professional with the new definition that we're using and the medical center or the clinic, all you have to do is go to our zoning bylaws, and it's allowed in University Station. So I don't understand why this is even being brought forth, because it's opening up and making other areas of town vulnerable to a medical center or a clinic, or office of healthcare professional, whatever that is. I've read the definition, but it's very broad. Thank you.
Nora?
The intent of this article is to close a hole that's there now. Right now, by not putting medical center or clinic in the use chart, it's a question of where it can go. It's clearly allowed at University Station under the UAMUD. It has been interpreted to be allowed anywhere in town. That's what people who want to put medical centers or clinics are looking at. They could put it not just at University Station, but in other areas, especially within the industrial district. That's our concern. This article is not about substance rehabilitation and treatment facilities, and it's not about hospitals. Those are not addressed by this article. This article is about medical centers and clinics, and it's about limiting them to University Station only. That's the intent of the article.
Anybody else?
Hi, Maria Costantini, 15 Spelman Road. I want to talk again, if you excuse me, about the Morrison Field, because I spoke last time, and I saw that now the selectmen have made this big proposal and the big step, and I commended them for that. I just want to maybe put it a little bit in perspective, and some of what I say has already been said, but Islington is a high-density area, a lot of businesses, and now new construction. Roach Brothers at some point may go, and there may be more buildings. It's going to change a lot over time. We don't know, but the whole Washington Street on the side of Roach Brothers is going to change at some point. So here we have an area that is very small, not even an acre or maybe an acre, that you can sort of preserve. And you say it's very hard to turn to the town meeting, but with time, things change. There's erosion of the land. Maybe you have to take a piece here and there. And this land is also useful because it's porous, so it helps the drainage in a sea of concrete. So, when we protect the Sankey, it wasn't the town, it was the land trust. But are we sorry that we protected that land? No, I don't think of it. And would we be sorry if we protected Morrison Field? I don't think anybody would be, because it can be used for other reasons. You can have a park at some point. So you have two options. Of course, you can decide on propose postponement, or you could just say these are the pros and cons, and maybe allow the residents, to make a decision on their own. Thank you.
Yes.
Brendan Mullen from Hawthorne Street on Islington side of town. Two things, first of all. One is, at the last meeting and again at this meeting, we've heard that substance abuse centers have been defined as non-profit or not-for-profit entities. It's really not the case anymore. It might have been the case 15, 20 years ago. But since the Affordable Care Act and with the advent of federal subsidies for opioid treatment, it's become almost like the reverse of the pill mill, where you've got really unscrupulous operators opening clinics, running patients through them, claiming federal subsidies for them, and really not helping addicts, and definitely not-for-profit entities. So we should be careful just, kind of saying that and accepting it, that it's a not-for-profit, useful entity, because they're not all that way. And again, just building on what Sandra had said, why are we doing this when so many other towns are not doing it, and why now? I'm just not getting it. Why are we opening it up for discussion and putting something on the board that it seems like a lot of other towns have said we don't want to put it on the board because we don't actually want to open up for that. Let it, let it be a much more difficult topic for a developer to try and bring in, rather than defining it and giving them a location to bring it into.
Well, I don't think it is being defined, but thank you. Yes, Nora?
I just want to say one more time, this article is not about rehabilitation treatment and substance abuse facilities. That's not what it's about. There could be an article in the future. The planning board has looked at that before. I hope they will look at it again. The reason they are looking at it is because there is an exposure here. Because we have a definition that excludes rehabilitation, substance rehabilitation and treatment facilities. Then there's a question of, well, where can they go? Right now, because they're not defined and they're excluded from medical centers or clinics, that question will come up if someone wants to bring one to Westwood. The planning board started to look at this in 2017 specifically to address that issue, to say where they can go and where they cannot go. That's not on the table now, though. That article was considered in 2017. It has not been put forward this year. This article is about medical centers and clinics. That's all that's contained in this article. There's nothing in this article to change the way the town addresses substance rehabilitation and treatment facilities. They are use not mentioned now. If this article is approved by town meeting, they will remain a use not mentioned until the planning board finds a way to address them at a future town meeting.
Yes.
So I have a couple of David Atkins, 783 High Street Planning Board member. So there's a couple of things. First, I wanted to go back to the Morrison Field article. I heard a little bit of resistance, I think, to kind of the future. We can't predict the future, and kind of the risk of tying the hands of the town, and sort of, are we smarter than people in the future and all. But I would just observe that, I mean, we have done other methods of conservation. We have easements for affordable housing. We have conservation land. We have done many things that where we decide we want to protect something forever, and that is our legacy for the future, is to say we're going with this article, we lock down Morrison Field so that 100 years from now, it's still going to be there. And, as Pat Hearn was saying, maybe it's possible. I don't want to go there. Okay, they'll be playing baseball there 200 years from now. Nothing wrong with that. In fact, 300 years. Why not? Why not go ahead and do that? So I think that I just wanted to address that a little bit to say it's a great idea to decide as a community we're going to preserve something forever, and we should never be afraid to do that. There are other things that I wish we could do that for historical homes, but it's been tried many times and hasn't happened. The other thing was, so this one, I would love for the planning board to be able to address the concerns of the things that are not defined here. And we tried to do that last year, and we had a room full of very angry and upset people. This has nothing to do with that. Medical center or clinic. Do you want to prevent an urgent care center from opening up in the town center? That's really all that's about. It's got nothing to do with substance abuse, whatever. It's about defining a medical center or clinic and saying it's only going to be allowed kind of like where there is one now in University Station. And then the doctor or dentist thing, I really don't understand the degree of detail of trying to understand that. We're just updating the language to reflect a modern description of what a healthcare professional is. And it's an office. It's an office of a healthcare professional. I think people are searching for something that's just not there. There's something, I don't understand that. So I think that this is a very straightforward and limited article that tries to take these definitions that have been in the bylaws and apply them to these zones in a way that makes sense, that doesn't change anything, but that clearly defines them. And for the case of like the urgent care center or a dialysis treatment place or something that's a medical center or clinic, it says it can only go where we've got one now. So that's all.
Can I ask Dave a question?
Yes. Yeah.
Dave, the planning board voted 4-0 to withdraw the planning board's article concerning Morrison Field. You can't speak for anyone else, but did you vote in favor of withdrawing the planning board article because the select board was proposing to put it into 97 protection?
I did. I think that our original article would have not been effective at protecting it in the way that this is the way to go.
Thank you.
And there were only 4 members at that meeting, so.
Yeah.
Just to add, I appreciate what the light of nose is saying, and I understand the intent behind it. I think because of the way the definitions are crafted, it does highlight those yeses and leave us open, and I think that's sort of where the concern is, and the searching, quite frankly, is. I appreciate what it's trying to do. I wonder if that line of nose would be more impactful, however, once the substance abuse definitions are refined, everything is clarified, and then it could be one unified statement that's complete, because as it is now, I think it's not complete, and it's opening up those yeses and causing that concern that you're hearing. So.
Brian Gorman, 145 School Street, member of the planning board. Just to the question about Article 97, so myself and Deb also voted to withdraw the Morrison Field one because we were in favor of supporting the Article 97. And I believe that the fourth, yes, the fourth one was the same.
Okay, anything?
Mike.
Oh, Mike, go ahead.
Evening, Michael Walsh, 47 Phillips Brooks Road, but also a member of the Select Board. I think part of the Article 97 and the whole reason to take Morrison Park out of the FUMOD was to, to give the residents a little bit more peace based on what's happened in Islington. That's really the bottom line. There's some fear that, at town meeting, first it was denied, then it was approved. And I think the whole reason for the Article 97 is to make the residents feel comfortable that, they're not going to be outvoted at town meeting for a piece of property that they want to stay a ballpark. And, for recreational use, shall we say. I won't say a ballpark. I won't say it won't be around in 200 years. But for whatever reason, it's just, I think, to give the residents more. I mean, I think when you talk about the requirements of Article 97, you know, 2/3 of the legislature, if the town really wants it, they really have no interest in it. You know, any environmental board that's gonna approve it, they don't have any interest in Westwood. It depends on what our residents want, but it makes it a little bit, just a little bit, so that it's just not town meeting that controls it. And I think that's the real reason for it. As far as the medical uses, part of the reason we put this forward, medical center or clinic cannot be anywhere but University Station. I'll give you 2 properties to think about. How about Everett Street? How about Southwest Park? Right now, somebody could come and try to put a medical center at both of those places. This says absolutely not. The only place you can put it is University Station. So I think it fills that hole that people aren't thinking about. You know, you're not thinking necessarily about neighborhoods, but what about these industrial parks? Right? You can go there. This says absolutely not. You're not allowed to do it. The Office of Healthcare Professional, my office, my law office is in LBA, so technically it could go there. But that would be a small office. So I think what we've done, and the reason we took these up, was to just try to clarify, and the Article 97, to clarify that, you know what, the town is invested in this, and we're not going to change it, and we're going to prove it to you. So, thank you.
I want to reiterate, Office of Healthcare Professional, Medical Center, or Clinic were uses specifically for and incorporated in the Master Development Agreement for University Station. And to say that that footnote is telling us that it will only go in University Station doesn't make sense, because that's the only place where it can go right now. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Anybody from the public? Now, oh, yes, now you can close your meeting, or do whatever you need to do.
You go on the microphone, Brian.
Okay.
Yeah, so I make a motion to vote to continue the planning board hearing to Tuesday, March 17th at 7 p.m. at 50 Carby Street.
Second.
And all those in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstained, so it passes.
Okay. Any more comments from the board on any procedures or anything? Nope. And that, do we have anything else?
I'm going to send you the updated list of articles with owners. I'll do that tomorrow.
Yes, they keep changing.
Yes. We're fluid until next the final public hearing. So
Okay.
I'll send that.
And
Put them in on the phone.
other than that, we've, yep. And
Motion to adjourn.
Wait 1 second.
wait a second, and I'll get you in a minute. And then I know I have a second too. And next, we've got the next meeting is March 10th, the subcommittee reports, and everybody is, so I hope you all can attend that. And do you need to talk to anybody about when we get?
He's on, sorry. Howard, he's on.
Turn your volume down.
Okay, I know it's me. I know I listened to myself.
Okay.
Do you need to talk to anybody about when they need to get?
Nope,
material
I've
to
sent
you?
out, all the
Okay.
chairs have that information with their
All right.
subcommittee reports.
So I recognize Mike's motion to adjourn and Chris's second.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, great, thank you.
57 people.